So we are, is that little light blue still, or is it green? Okay, good. Okay, right on. So we're in chapter Acts 27. That's where we are, Acts 27. We're at verse 13 is where we're going to start. But before we do that, we want to remember where we are at. So where are we at? We're at Paul. When Paul was traveling, he, at the end of his third missionary journey, he was going to go back to Jerusalem. He was told not to go. The Holy Spirit warned him not to go. People through the Holy Spirit warned him not to go. He still went. When he got there, of course, he got jumped. The Roman soldiers had to go in and save him. All right. And that's when he asked if he could speak to the crowd. He started speaking to the crowd. They got all crazy on him again. So then they took him into the barracks. The next day he went before the Sanhedrin, if you remember. Pharisees, Sadducees in the same room. They don't have the same theological ideology. Sadducees don't believe in like angels, resurrection, any of that stuff, where the Pharisees do. And Paul used to be a Pharisee, so he mentions the fact that he believes that Jesus was raised from the dead. And of course that divides the room and they get all crazy on each other and that type of thing. And I could just imagine the Roman soldiers are sitting there going, these people are crazy, man. I don't know what they're doing. So he grabs onto Paul and he finds out that there's going to be an attempt on his life. So he takes him to Caesarville or Caesarea. He takes him to Caesarea, and there he stands trial before the guy that was there, the guy that was in charge of Judea, which was Festus. And then I was waiting for you to see if you're going to change your mind. Festus. Paul was incarcerated there. He heard Paul's plea, and he heard the Pharisees and the Sadducees and the high priest make their case. Didn't seem like it was worth anything, but he held on to him anyway until he ended his reign and a new person took over, which was Felix. You knew it was an F. Felix. He took over and he wanted to kind of clean up some of the mess from the previous guy. So he sees this guy, Paul. We got to figure out what to do with this guy, Paul. Paul, at the time, when Felix looked at him and heard his case, he's like, dude, there's no reason why I should keep you. And he was going to, there was no reason to keep him. They held on to him. Festus did the same thing, looked him over and listened to his case and was like, I don't even know why you're here. But letting him go wasn't a thing because they knew that his life would be in danger. So Paul invokes his Roman right to be heard before Caesar, which is like being heard by the Supreme Court. Before he was shipped off to Rome, he was in front of King Agrippa, which he is in the line of who? Herod's. Yeah, he's in the line of Herod's. And he was actually a Jewish sympathizer when the Jews had an uprising against Rome. He actually sympathized with the Jews. He sided with Rome, of course, but he sympathized with the Jews, tried to get it calmed down and all that kind of stuff. So when Paul pled his case to him, because Festus was like, if I'm going to send him to Caesar, I better have like a good report. Like somebody's got to know why this guy's going. And so far I haven't seen anything worth him going. And then the king hears him, Agrippa hears him and goes, yeah, I don't know why this guy's here. Like if he wouldn't have pled, as a matter of fact, right at the end of the previous chapter, it said, if he wouldn't have invoked his right to Caesar, we could just let him go right now. But because they invoked his right to Caesar, it was locked in. Now God had told him, or Jesus had told him, that he was going to be with him until he goes and meets in Rome, so that he will be able to get to Rome and be able to talk to people in Rome and all that kind of stuff. So Paul was fairly confident in the fact that he's going to be able to get there, no problem. So from there, he's in Caesarville, and he had like a big garrison in Caesarea, that was looking after him. And then he had a smaller contingent. Centurion had a smaller contingent of soldiers that were looking after him, and some other prisoners that maybe were headed to Rome also. And they were also allowed him to take a couple of people with him. Do you remember who Paul took with him? Luke. Aristarchus. Yeah, Aristarchus. We know Luke because we get that famous they, we thing. When he's writing and he's not part of the narrative, he says they. But when he is part of there and he's present with Paul, he says we. And he just happens to say we were able to go with him. So we know that he's now traveling with him. So where we left off was he jumped in a boat, or they found a boat, and they took him all the way over to Sidon, and they were there. They were there for a little while. They took off, and they went on the winds through the Mediterranean were really bad. Okay, the winds through the Mediterranean were really bad. So they went up along the side of Cyprus. They wanted to go along the coastline and use the island to kind of break the wind because the wind was so bad. So they used the island as kind of a windbreak, and then they came around and they did the same thing. When they came around here, they used these islands and used Crete in the same way, right? To break that wind using these islands. Then we left off, where we left off was we left off with Paul and his crew in Crete, right? And the idea he went to, do you remember where the city they were in? Fair Havens. So they were in Fair Havens. And they're like, okay, we've already been spending a lot of time because the winds were kind of bad and stuff like that. And we got to get moving because we're on our way to Rome. So we got to get going. So they found a guy. They knew a guy. And they found a guy who was a shipper, a cargo shipper. All right. And since we are here in Mobile, I think sometimes when we think of, I don't know, maybe this is just me. When we think of ships that they had in the first century, you're thinking about these little dinky boats, you know what I mean? Or maybe we've seen Pirates of the Caribbean too much and we think of, boats like that, right? This was a cargo ship, and it was hauling, basically we're going to find out, he was hauling wheat. And it was a big cargo ship. We're in Mobile, and we've been out in the bay, or maybe some of us have been out in the bay, and we've seen cargo ships. Those big suckers. And they have a bunch of those containers on there. You know what I mean? Imagine something like that. A lot of times when we look at scripture, we have a distorted kind of a thought. Like Paul is, and we're going to find that out too. We don't find the size or the magnitude of the ship, nor do we find out the number of people that are on the ship until I think 38. Don't look ahead, Vivian. Okay, all right. I gotta watch Vivian, man. So I know, spoiler alert. You're gonna find the magnitude of the size of the ship that they were on. So sometimes I think when we think about that, like the idea of when Jesus ascended, we talked about this, when Jesus ascended and they were trying to find someone to replace Judas, who hung himself. They were trying to find somebody who would meet a certain criteria. And when we see Jesus ascending into heaven, we think that it was just him and 11 dudes standing around there. And it was a touching moment and, all that kind of thing. There's probably hundreds of people there. All right. So, things like that, we don't necessarily look at it in the scope of that until we look at scripture. And we're going to see the scope of what they were doing, but not right away. But I'm telling you now, I'm kind of a spoiler alert, a little thing, to tell you that it's a kind of a sizable ship with a sizable amount of people on there. And we'll see how much later. Because when you see what happens to the ship, you need to think about how serious it is. All right? How serious it is. If you're thinking of the Black Pearl from Pirates of the Caribbean, it's not as big a ship, and you're thinking, oh, it's not that big a deal. But we're talking about a ship, not a ship, a ship. Okay, so it's kind of good to have that perspective when you're going into this ahead of time. All right. So, any thoughts, comments, questions? We know where we are. We know where we left off. We know where we're headed. Paul, the owner of the ship, and the crew of the ship, the captain, said, let's go ahead. We're good. And Paul says, dude, I'm not a boat owner. I'm not a captain of a ship, but I've been plenty of boat wrecks. I've been plenty of wrecks my life. I don't think we should go. But they listened. They didn't listen to Paul. They listened to the boat owner and the captain of the ship. And they said, no. They woke up the next morning and the wind seemed calm. So they're like, we're good to go. Load it up, baby. We're out. So then they take off. And their shot is to get over to Rome. They're heading this way. And we'll see what happens to them. Okay? Verse 13. This is where it all seems really good. It starts off that way. When the south wind blew softly, supposing that they had obtained their desire. What that means is they woke up that morning and the wind wasn't bad. They've been battling the wind for quite some time since they left Caesarea. They've been battling the wind. When they finally got over to Crete, they woke up and the wind was very soft and everything. They're thinking, this is ideal sailing weather. Let's rock and roll. That's what they were thinking. When the south wind blew softly, supposing that they had obtained their desire, putting out to sea, they sailed close to Crete. So remember what they were over here at Fairhaven. And then they went all the way over to kind of the tip of the island to set sail, right? And then they took off. Boom! So they kept to Crete, and they were going to head out. They were probably staying close to some of the land so that they could make across the Aegean Sea. That's where the Aegean Sea is, right here, right? So they were thinking, oh, we're just going to go. We'll be good. It'll be great. All right? It'll be fine. Verse 14. But not long after, here's a good one for you. A tempestuous, whatever, head wind rose called Eurocladon. All right? Now, maybe some of your translations don't even use that word. It uses northeastern. Yeah, northeastern.
Fierce wind called the northeastern.
Yeah. Yes, the northeastern. So here, if you're reading like the New King James, something like that, it has this weird title, right? Basically, what that title means is a northeastern wind. All right. So that kind of thing. First off, that word, what was it? Tempestuous or tempestuous. That word is an interesting word. How they came up with it in English, I don't know. But in the Greek, it means just a strong wind and stuff like that. Actually, the root of that word means is typhoon, which is where we get our word for typhoon. So that what happened is they set sail, and not long after they set sail, a typhoon hit. Okay, not a little storm, like a crazy storm. So because we have that word, we see this weird kind of title for this word, which just means northeastern wind. But it wasn't just a breeze; it was a serious thing. Now, I'm just making this point, just to kind of show. I don't know what I'm pointing out. I guess the oddity of it. I guess we live near water, right? We live near water all the time. Where does a lot of the wind that we get come from? Where are we? Oh, this isn't even America. Yeah, it comes from the northwest. It comes across the land, right?
Northwest or northeast?
Northwest. Most of our friends come from
Yeah.
the northwest.
Yeah, it comes from the northwest and then circles around, right? It just follows the land. Yeah. Yeah, right. So it follows around. So this is kind of an oddity to me. Whenever you read in the Bible, crazy things or big important things always come from the east. When the wise men came to visit Jesus, they came from the east. When people came to take over Judea, they came from the east. East is always really an identifier. It's kind of weird how the east is kind of an identifier for crazy things. The northeast wind. So if they're here and they're setting sail out to here, like a northeasterly wind came across this water. Normally it would kind of follow maybe the land or something, but it just came right over the top of them. And it didn't, and if it's a northeast wind and it's blowing from the northeast, it would be blowing them downward, right? So the reason I'm pointing that out is if you look at your little map, you're going to see that they took a wow, like they went like this, right? Well, that wasn't by choice. It was coming from the land. The leeward breeze hit them and pushed them out to sea, which is what we're going to see here in just a second. So I'm kind of just I'm just kind of pointing out that it just came across and just nailed them, and it happened like that, right?
What does that say was to lee?
Lee?
Yeah, to the lee of, it says a couple of
Oh, yes, that. Yes, so if like it's used several times here, so they go to the lee side of the island. So what they would do is go across, or they would use the island itself as a windbreak. You know what I'm saying? So if they sailed this way, all right, if they sailed this way, they would be exposed to the wind that's coming across the Mediterranean. But instead, they stuck to the lee side of the island and then the lee side of these islands so that they could use the land mass as kind of a windbreak. Does that make sense? Yeah.
It's a side, right?
Yeah, it's a side.
I don't know which side it is, but it's one of the.
Yeah.
It's just whatever side doesn't have
But
the
if
wind
they're
on
going
it.
this way, it's going to be on the left side. If they're going that way, it's going to be on the right side. Isn't it always a particular side? Like the boat's going forward and lee is one, either the left side.
So you know how like starboard bow is no matter which way the ship is facing, there's always
Oh, no.
It's the lee.
The leeward side, you're talking about the leeward side. Is that what you're talking about?
Whatever
Yeah.
lee means to the lee of this island. What's
Where is that? Where do you see Lee again?
I don't have my computer to work with.
Okay, well, there you go.
To the lee of Cyprus, verse 4. Yeah, but you pass to the lee of Cyprus.
Yes.
Well, my translation says there along the northern coast.
Yes, that's along the northern coast. And when they had put out to sea from there, they sailed under the shelter of Cyprus, is what I have. That's in that's italicized. The different translations, and they put out, and they were under the lee.
Leeward in the dictionary
Yeah.
means situated on or toward the side, sheltered from the wind.
Yes,
Downwind.
Oh.
right.
Yeah, so
What's that?
it's
What's
not.
that?
It's not a-
right.
You're whatever is protecting you from the wind. Okay, whatever is protecting you from the wind, which is kind of, that's what I said. It's just they were just staying along the coast so that the wind was not pushing them against.
Whichever direction the wind is coming from. you know, the lee
They would, the lee side would be something that they would brace themselves against, right? Yeah. Okay, so when 15, so when the ship was caught and could not head into the wind, they let her drive. Now this is a weird, do you have something different?
Into the wind,
They,
we
do you have,
gave way to it, and we're driven along.
we're driven along. Okay. What happened here? So I don't know if you know much about sailing, that type of thing. Yeah. So if you are in a storm and there's waves, you turn into the waves. So if the waves are coming at you, you turn the nose of your ship into them and you try to go over them, mostly before they try to crest, because then it'll come over the front of your ship. But you go into the waves, right? Yeah. So you turn and go into the waves. These guys set sail, and this is once again, it's not a ship, it's a ship. So when they started out and they got caught in this gale that came, it was hitting them broadside against the side of the ship. So what they were trying to do was turn themselves into the wind and into the waves so that they could, it's better to be a point than a big, surface to be hitting the waves and the wind, right? Here, when the ship was caught in it, they couldn't head into the wind. And that's what you want. You don't want to be sideways when the wind's blowing to make yourself into a big sail. You want to have that narrow point so that you can drive through the wind. They couldn't turn that boat fast enough because the typhoon hit so quickly. So they had no choice but to just let it happen. Imagine for a second, if you can picture it in your head, one of those big cargo ships, and it's sideways in the wind, and it's just being tossed, okay? Just imagine that for a second. Like, how in the world would that thing stay up? You know what I'm saying? Its only hope is to turn into the wind and ride through the waves and ride through the wind. But they couldn't. It was so powerful and so quick that came up that they just had to ride it out, okay? So imagine how violent that could have been with a ship that big, right? Crazy. 16, and run under the shelter of the island. Once again, that's the lee. I don't know if it says, does it say lee somewhere? 16 does 6?
Under the lee.
Yeah, under the lee. There you go. Yeah. So yeah, under the shelter of an island called Claudia. So now we don't, yes, we don't actually have, I don't have, it's not on this. Oh, it's on this one. Squint. Right here. So there's a little island. There's a little island right here. It's not on this big map, and it might not be on your little map either. But there's a little small island just off of Crete that is that island. It has it right here. But it's basically like right here where this L is. Like, it's basically right there. Okay? So if you look at the distance there between those islands, basically where the L is, the tip of the L is, that's where this little island is. They didn't get out to sea very far before they were like overwhelmed by the waves and by the typhoon, right? They were overwhelmed quickly, very quickly. And there they were driven, and they were in the shelter of that island. And they scattered the skiff, and they secured the skiff with difficulty. So it was a big ship, right? When you have, you think of the Titanic, what does the Titanic have in case, it hits an iceberg and goes to sink? You have lifeboats, right? These lifeboats, here we see that it had a skiff, a smaller ship, or smaller boat, that it could be used. A lot of times, more than it is a lifeboat, sometimes these larger ships will tow a smaller ship. Think of it like your RV. Like you have a big, 36-foot long RV. Can you drive that through the Taco Bell drive-through? No.
Some people try.
Oh yeah, some people try. Okay? But instead, what you do, you tow your car with it, right? So you go and you park your RV somewhere, you detach your smaller vehicle, your car, and then you drive that to Taco Bell, right? This is what they do. They have this big ship. So can you go dock in every island that you see? Can you go get, no. So what would you do? You would anchor just off the island or off sea, or, still in the sea, but you wouldn't run aground close to the island. You would anchor just off the island. You get in the skiff and go back and forth. Here, this is what these guys are doing. They had this skiff that they're towing and they wanted to secure it. Why? Because they're floating in the water. They had no control and they're just dragging this thing. It's probably not helping them. You know what I mean? So they're like, dude, we got to get this thing on board before it takes us down. They thought they were going to go down anyway. So they grab this thing and they secure it, right? They want to make sure that they have this. And verse 17. When they had taken it on board, they used cables. This is kind of funny. When they had taken it on board, they used cables to undergird the ship, fearing that they should run aground on the, let me see if it has multiple. Oh no, Syrtis sand. The sandbars. They struck sail, so they were driven. Now, let me explain what this is in sailing terms, I guess. They were afraid they were going to run aground. So what they did was they were getting tossed to and fro by the wind so badly that the violent shaking of the ship was probably or could possibly start loosening the actual moorings and the actual ship itself. So what they do? Well, in a very MacGyver-like way, they took ropes and straps and put it around the ship to hold it together. They're duct taping that thing. So they put, that's what you do, man. So you take some, yeah, that's right. So you put some ropes around there, probably around the sides or maybe the nose to hold it together. So that way they would be able to, withstand some of the waves a little bit better, right? So they're securing it. They're trying to do everything that they possibly can to be able to survive this thing. Now, what else they do, they did two things. The first thing they did is they put cables to undergird the ship. They put these ropes under there to hold it together. That's the first thing they did. Second thing they did is they're fearing that they run aground. They struck sail. They struck sail and so were driven. That phrasing struck sail or strike sail, whatever you have. What's that?
They dropped the sea anchor. They lowered the sea anchor.
Two separate things.
No, in 17?
17. This is in 17, yes. Fearing that they would run aground on the sandbars of Syrtis, they lowered the sea anchor and let the ship be driven along.
Oh,
Mine says drift anchor.
yeah. So what they did was they wanted to make sure that they were trying to get their rigging on and secure their ship and make sure that they were not going to run aground. And the only control that they had, all right, is as they're going along, they had no control. They couldn't turn the ship or anything. So they drug the anchor in an effort to, big ships like that have anchors. Yeah, they have ships. They have anchors in the front. They have anchors in the back. We're going to find that they drop a bunch of anchors in the back later on because they're trying to keep from running into
those types of anchors basically was just something that slowed them down.
Yes. Yeah. That's, yeah.
Didn't hook into the
Right.
sand.
Right. And that's what it says. And they were driven. They were still in motion. They were trying to slow themselves. Why? Because they're trying to bind the ship up and trying to make sure that's okay. And they also, right. Exactly. And that's going to be a problem for them, as we're going to see, because they're trying to slow themselves down so that they can gain more control of the ship. Because if they're binding the ship, then there's a strong possibility that the ship could fly apart while they're in the middle of the Mediterranean Sea, which is not ideal. So, in verse 18, and because they were exceedingly tempest-tossed, the next day they lightened the ship. So, what they had to do was start tossing stuff overboard, non-essential things. If you're heavier, obviously you're sinking more, and if you're getting rocked back and forth, what you want to do is be as much on the top of the water as possible. The more you sink into the water, the more the water comes over, it's going to push you down more, and it's going to cause problems, obviously. So the lighter you are on the water, the higher you up are on the water, when the water comes over the side and pushes you down, you're obviously not going to sink. So this is their next move, right? They were exceedingly tempest tossed. They're totally getting slapped around. They had the light in the ship. On the third day, so right there we see that Luke's still there, okay? We threw the ship's tackle overboard with our own hands. Here we see that they're trying to get rid of stuff that's going to weigh them down. What are they? They're a cargo ship. So unfortunately, the first thing to go was probably the cargo, right? Well, now this is still happening. It is happening for days now. So here on the next day, with their bare hands, on the third day, they were grabbing stuff and just throwing it overboard. Okay, they're continuing. Everybody's involved in it. Hey man, let's get in on this, man. They're just throwing whatever they can overboard to make themselves not top heavy and not sink in deeper into the water so they can be on top of it. Okay. Then, so they're throwing everything overboard. Verse 19. On the third day, did I just read that? Oh, no. Verse 20. Now, when neither sun nor stars appeared for many days, and no small tempest beat on us, all hope that we would be saved was finally given up. Okay. This one is an important piece of the puzzle, and you kind of alluded to it here, Tom. The only way that a sailor can navigate is by the sun and the stars. Those are the only two things that they have, right? If the sun's up, they know exactly it rises in the east, sets in the west type of thing. They know that. And if they're not, and if the sun's not up, they have the stars to be able to navigate in. This storm was so bad and the cloud cover was so thick that they couldn't tell. We've been there before here, when it gets rainy, it's still, you can still tell it's daytime. It's a little darker, but you can still tell it's daytime. But you can't see the sun. Like, it's not blaring down on you because the cloud cover is so thick. And that happens here in Mobile all the time. Here is the same kind of thing. All right. They were here right by this little, you can't really see it, but they were right here by this little island. But then after that, they got pushed out further. And as they get pushed out further and they weren't able to steer, the only thing they could do is try and dredge an anchor to try and slow them down. But that wasn't really doing a whole lot because here they're just getting tossed all over the place, right? So now they can't see the sun. They can't see the stars. They don't know where they are. It's days since they've been thrown and slapped all over the place. They finally looked at it and went, we ain't made it through this, man. This is it for us, which is an important piece of the puzzle because later on we're going to see that it takes a 180-degree turn. But here we can see that all hope is basically going away. These guys who have been sailors for years and years and years, and these guys that have, thought that they knew what they were doing, they finally gave up hope because they didn't think they were going to make it. So, after a long, verse 21. But after long abstinence from food, then Paul stood in the midst of them and said, "Men, you should have listened to me and not have sailed from Crete and incurred this disaster and loss." Okay, if you read verse 21 by itself without reading the following verses, what does it give you the impression that Paul is doing here? Exactly. All right. If you read it without context, you read this and you go, Paul finally gets up and says, dude, where were you when I told you we should have stayed back in the, you know what I mean? I told you so. But I don't think that's what he's doing here. Because if we read the context of what's going on here, we see that these guys for days, all they've been doing is on crisis management, right? And at the time when the morale is at the very, very lowest, like they're basically giving up because they ain't going to make it.
Well, I think that was his way of getting their attention.
Yes. So he goes, yeah, well, yes and no, because he's telling you, dude, you shouldn't have done this. And I think he's doing this to get them to understand, hey, man, I'm not telling I told you so. I'm telling you that I know what I'm talking about. All right? When I told you that we shouldn't do this, it's because I understood what we should or shouldn't do. You were doing something crazy, and I was trying to keep you from doing that. But now here we are. It is what it is. Then he lays this on them, which is a good thing. Okay? Verse 23. For there stood by me. Oh, did I? And now I urge you. Oh, I'm sorry. And now I urge you to take heart, for there will be no loss of life among you, but only of the ship. Verse 23, I'll go on. For there stood by me this last night an angel of God, to whom I belong and whom I serve, saying, do not be afraid, Paul. You must be brought before Caesar. And indeed, God has granted you all those who sail with you. This is the big kicker. This one's a little different. If you read that part, then it kind of makes sense why he goes and says, look, you should have listened to me. That's okay. It is what it is now. But I'm telling you right now that God came to me and he promised me, even before we left, he promised me that I'm going to make it. I'm going to make it to Rome. So first off, he's saying, oh, I'm going to make it to Rome. The ship might not make it, but I'll make it to Rome. But he said that this angel of God also told me that anyone who is sailing with me will also make it. That when their hope was at its lowest, when they're at their lowest point, they're about ready to give up because they didn't think they were going to make it, Paul comes to them. And also in verse 21, it says that they haven't really been eating because all they've been doing is just crisis management, running around, trying to stay alive. Here, get this going. And it's been going on literally for days. It's not like it happened for a while and then it took a break and then it happened again and it took a break. That's all they've been doing for days. So here he says, I know morale's low. You should have listened to me, but it didn't happen. That's okay because God came to me, gave me a vision, and said that I'm going to make it to Rome. And anyone who's sailing with me will make it also.
That's why I think that first statement was to get their attention. Look, I told you not to leave. You didn't listen to me. Look at what I'm going through.
Yeah.
But I'm going to tell you what's about to happen.
Yeah.
Maybe they'll listen to me.
Yeah, maybe. Verse 25, therefore take heart, men, for I believe God that it will be just as it was told to me. That statement right there, to me, is pretty awesome. God told me this is what's going to happen. I got no doubt. God's going to fulfill his promise. He basically, gave me this prophecy that I'm going to make it. It's going to happen. And since this angel said that you guys are going to make it with me, as long as you're with me.
But the ship's got to be lost.
Yeah, the ship's going to be lost.
It's like they've got to go through this
Yeah.
terrible event of not having that ship underneath.
Right.
At some point.
Right. Exactly. So you're going to lose the ship, but you'll keep your life, So they're at the lowest point thinking they ain't going to make it. Well, now he says, you're going to make it. You're definitely going to make it. The ship may not make it, but we're going to make it. And I want you to take heart because I believe in God that it's going to happen just as he said it was going to be. And then verse 26, however, we must run aground on a certain island. I think that's an important statement too. He says we're going to run aground on a certain island. He doesn't say we're going to run aground on an island.
Gilligan's Island.
Yeah, exactly. He says it's a certain island. So obviously, it's an island of God's design, right?
NIV has some items, so it has that uncertainty.
Oh, well, you're in the MIV? Oh, no wonder. Okay. No, I'm just kidding. Yeah, I think that it gives us that idea that, we're going to run aground, and there's a plan to this. God has a plan to this. The ship's going to get lost, and you're going to run into an island. But you guys will make it as long as you're with me, is kind of the concept that he's given us there. And that's kind of an important piece of the puzzle, right? And if I was at the midst of thinking that I'm going to cash it in, all right, I'm okay. I can have that, right? I'll be all right there. So what happens? This is the big thing. Now, when it was 14, when it was the 14th night had come, okay, last time we checked in, it was like 3 days, well, it's been 2 weeks that they're just getting slapped around by the water and have no knowledge of where they are. They can't see the stars. They can't see the sun. They don't know where they are. And yet 14 days later, this is crazy. When the 14th night came, as we were driven up and down in the Adriatic Sea, about midnight, the sailors sensed that they were drawing near to some land. I think that's interesting. I guess if you're a sailor and you've been doing this for a while, maybe you get some kind of idea. Maybe when you feel land coming, maybe the pressure changes or something. Maybe the winds change. Maybe the temperature drops or rises. I don't know. But I guess if you spent all that time, if you literally were a sailor, maybe you kind of get that feeling. Your spider sense kind of tingles and you're like, oh, maybe that's so. But here we see that they were coming in to something, and they could feel that. Verse 28, they took soundings and found it to be 20 fathoms. And when they had gone a little further, they took soundings again and found it to be 15 fathoms. Okay, soundings. Soundings, us in the 21st century might have a misconception of what soundings are. We have sonar, and we think to ourselves, we can use soundings as, we send sound waves out, it bounces off the bottom, it comes back up and tells us how it. They didn't have that kind of technology. They didn't have some guy with a straw going, you know what I mean? And then I think that's about 20 fathoms. They had a rock and a stick. It was that soundings actually comes from, it's derived from a lead ball, and they would have it on a rope. So all they do is they let this rope down, and when it finally, the lead hits the ground and you have the rope on this end, you go, oh, that's 20 fathoms, right? It's just a measuring stick, basically. So what they do is I think we're getting close to land. I feel like we're getting close to land. Throw the lead ball over. They throw it over, 20 fathoms. Then they do it again. And when they do it again, it's 15 fathoms. Now, fathom back then, fathom is about 6 feet. So if it was 20 fathoms, that's about 120 feet. And then shortly after that, they do it again, and it's 15 fathoms. Now it's 90 feet. All right. So if you're on a big ship and you're 90 feet down, like if you're on a little ship, it's 90 feet down, you're thinking, I got plenty of time. You're on a big ship and you got 90 feet. That's a big deal. Like you're getting close to the land, right? Remember, like I said, if you have a big ship like that, and they carry a skiff with them, and so that they can dock offshore and ride the skiff in and back, right? That's how it worked. So here, they're doing these soundings, or they're using this measuring rod, I guess you could say, and that they would see that it was, how many fathoms it was. In verse 29, then fearing lest they should run aground on the rocks, they dropped 4 anchors from the stern. Stern is the back of the boat. Yeah, rear of the boat. So they dropped 4 anchors from the rear of the boat so that they will stop. I think that's important because they've been toss. And I think if they drop it, they probably had anchors in the front and the back, right? I think if you're, correct me if I'm wrong, but when you're stationary and you want to stay that way, you drop both sides, both anchors. But when you want to stop and move in the direction or be pointed in the direction you want to go, you drop the rear anchors. So that way it holds it, and then your ship will, go in the direction it needs to go towards the land. And I think that's what they did. They dropped 4 anchors. Before they dropped 1 just to kind of dredge the bottom to slow them down. But if it ever caught, they might, be stuck there and that would be bad. Here, they're looking to get stopped. So they're dropping 4 anchors from the stern and pray for day to come. And as the sailors were seeking to escape from the ship, when they had let down the skiff into the sea under pressure or under pretense of putting out anchors from the prow. So these guys dropped 4 anchors and they're going, hey, we're going to go drop some more anchors. And then they are acting like they're dropping anchors, but really they dropped the skiff. And they're probably thinking to themselves, we're getting close to land. And if we get close enough to land, let's drop the skiff in and get over there before this big boat goes under. You know what I mean? They had to bind this thing with ropes to make sure it didn't fall apart. So they're kind of going, let's do this. So anyway, when this happens, verse 31, Paul said to the centurion and the soldiers, unless these men stay in the ship, you cannot be saved. The vision was, I'm making it to Rome, and anyone sailing with me will make it also. But if you go off on your own, I can't account for your well-being. God said he'll protect me and anybody with me. If you're not with me, I don't know what's going to happen to you. So, yeah, exactly. With me, without me. With me, without me. Night and day. So anyway, that's a movie with Tom Cruise in it.
Action movie.
Yeah, and Cameron Diaz. That's a cultural reference, Sherry. Yeah. So anyway, there's verse 32. Verse 32, I think they finally came to an understanding that maybe, just maybe, Paul knows what he's talking about. Because in verse 32, they said, then the soldiers cut away the ropes of the skiff and let it fall off. Here they were trying to lower it, and they're like, you know what? You were right before. You've been right this whole time. Maybe we should listen to you. Maybe we should do that. I don't know that I would have cut the skiff loose, but I mean, that's what they did. They cut the skiff loose, but in doing that, they were all in. They were all in faithfully. This is what we're going to do. We're going to follow what this dude says because maybe, just maybe, he might know what he's talking about. So they're all in. They cut the skiff loose, and there it goes. All right. 33. 33. And as the day was about to dawn, Paul implored them all to take food, saying, today is the 14th day you have waited and continued without food and eaten nothing. So here he's talking to them. All you've been doing is crisis management, right? Crisis management. You haven't eaten in days, right? Maybe, 2 weeks long. That's a long time without food. You can probably attest to this. Anybody who tries to fast, you have to actually prep your body to be able to fast. It's like it talks about how Jesus fasted for 40 days, right? If you've ever tried to fast for a week, it takes a toll on the body. You can't just fast for 40 days. It ain't a thing. You have to prep for it. If you could last 2 weeks without losing it, you're pretty good, right? And these guys, all they've been doing is probably running off of adrenaline for 2 weeks. So Paul finally just says, guys, man, you just got to stop, grab something to eat, and get ready. Because whatever's going to happen, he told them, the angel said we're going to lose the ship. So maybe you should build up your strength before whatever is about to happen happens. You know what I mean? So here he implores them, take some food. It's the 14th day. You've not eaten. You got to eat something. Therefore, I urge you to take nourishment, for this is for your survival, since not a hair will fall from their head of any of you. Here he's reassuring them, guys, I told you that God is going to keep you alive. You're going to be fine. You're going to make it. So if you're going to make it, then keep your strength up, And from that, it's kind of a cool thing, right? From that, we see things turn around. When he had said these things, verse 35, when he had said these things, he took bread, gave thanks to God in the presence of them all, and then he broke it and he began to eat. What does he do? Guys, I need you to eat. You got to keep up your strength. God said he will take care of you. And he's already said, and I believe God's going to do it. God said he's going to take care of you. He's going to take care of you. So guys, let's just do this. They dropped the anchor. They're coming to a stop. It's about to break dawn. Maybe they're going to see the sun for the first time in 2 weeks. Guys, just get something to eat. So what does he do? He does what any good preacher would. He stops and he turns the attention where it belongs. Let's give thanks. Let's say prayer. Before we eat, he says a prayer, breaks bread, and he eats it. Then, in verse 36, then they were all encouraged and they took food themselves. It wasn't but a couple weeks ago they were ready to cash it in, you know, but now they're totally encouraged. They think that they're actually going to make it. And verse 37, and all we were, and this shows you the scope. It didn't tell you the scope of this before, but it tells you the scope of it now. And in all were 276 persons on the ship. Okay? That's how big the ship was. We're not talking the, Pirates of the Caribbean ship. We're talking a ship. You don't have almost 300 people on a little dinghy. You have 300 people on a ship, right? That's how big the ship was, and that's how many people were on there, right? I think sometimes people don't always know, or commentators and stuff like that don't know why Luke included the number of people that were on this ship. Me personally, I think I have an idea. And once again, I've stated it before. Sometimes we read these stories and we don't think of the scope of things. You know what I'm saying? We know that Paul was there. We know that we know that there was a boat captain and there was the owner was there of the shipping, of the ship, and we know that that Paul had a couple of friends there. Maybe there was a couple other guys there, and we kind of think of it as this small little thing. Nah, there was 276 people on the ship, so you got to think of the scope of what we're looking at, and I think that's why he throws that in there. Like, this is what it was like. How often can you get 276 people to agree to do anything? How often can you get that many people to just, as soon as the grumbling started happening and as soon as they've been tossed around for a couple of days, they were ready to throw in the towel. Just after a couple of days. 2 weeks later, Paul's going, guys, it'll be okay. And he says, he gives thanks to God, he eats, and then all of a sudden we see that everything, that the whole demeanor of everybody changes. That's kind of cool. And I think to me, I think that's why he says, that's why there are so many people on the ship, because they changed their whole demeanor, they changed their whole attitude towards everything. So when they had eaten enough, they lightened the ship and threw out the wheat into the sea. So this whole time, for 2 weeks, they've been tossing and turning and stuff because they're a big cargo ship. But they held on to their cargo up until this point. And they finally, to be able to get to where they need to get to, they let go of their cargo. I can only imagine how the owner of the ship felt after that. He's like, oh man, there goes the payday. You know what I mean? That's great. You know what I mean? But they had to do what they had to do to lighten the ship. So they threw it out, and then that's where they are on that whole thing. They lost it. They lost their cargo, but at least they're alive to see another day. Any thoughts, comments, questions?
Personally, I was imagining like a dozen people.
Yeah.
Previous verses.
Right.
Even though you stressed how big the ship was.
Exactly.
Just imagining a handful like you
Yeah.
said.
And that's kind of how it is. And on a bigger note than that, I know I stressed that it was a bigger boat. But just imagine, back in those days, because they aren't technologically advanced like we are per se, they still had boats that big. You know what I mean? They still had boats that big, and those boats were still doing shipping routes all through the Mediterranean. You know what I'm saying? So it was a legit business and a legit shipping routes and legit things. We kind of look at it in a smaller context, I think, just because we're reading it on the paper and we're only thinking of a couple people, but it was something substantial. You know what I mean? So, yeah, for sure. I think that's why it kind of ends up going, this was a big deal. So
It also makes a bit more sense about the crew plotting amongst themselves. It's like, if we're all gonna get away, you got this little boat, and with a ship that big, it probably were like 20 crew members or something, right?
yeah, so if he took yeah, that's a good point. So we found out earlier when we looked, when Paul was in Caesarea, he had a garrison there that was watching after him, probably like 1,000 soldiers that were in Caesarea itself. But when he left, they had a smaller contingent of specialty soldiers, maybe 100, maybe. All right, maybe not even that many, but we'll go with we'll stretch it to 100, right? So it's Paul, his two friends, a couple other dudes, and 100 soldiers, and yet. Yeah, there were other prisoners. And other prisoners. That's what I mean. There's a couple other guys that were prisoners. So here we see that the crew on the boat could have been substantial. It could have been 20 guys. It could have been 30. It could have been 40 guys. And then that means that the passengers and the maybe prisoners, that number grew too. You know what I'm saying? So you just got to imagine that, whatever scope in your mind you were thinking, it probably wasn't big enough. You know what I'm saying? Like, it probably wasn't big enough. You have to think of it in a grander scale. And I think that's why it's kind of cool. I think it's really cool because it gives us an idea of, wow, that was a deal. Like, that was a thing. They really, went through some stuff. Yeah.
What happens in the witness from Caesarea? I mean, what are you gonna do on a boat? A lot of times people sit around, they talk.
Oh yeah.
Where's that guy go? They probably knew everything about what was going on with Paul. Were gossiping about it. That.
Yeah.
And then they all survive, so they all get off the boat, and they're all going to be talking about.
Oh, for sure.
And there's this Paul guy who told us we're going to make it, and
well,
the whole boat is destroyed. So there's
remember
spread of the gospel.
Yeah.
250 plus people.
Remember, before they left Crete, they were inland a little bit into Fairhaven. And we know, not from this account, but we know from the account in Titus that Paul was there and was ministering to the people on that island. And he asks Titus to go there and finish what he had started. Because he was probably there in Fairhaven. He was probably talking to people. He was probably getting people up to speed on the gospel and stuff like that. They allowed him to have friends with him. So they must have allowed him some latitude. So he was probably out spreading the gospel. And then we know from Titus that he writes Titus and goes, hey man, can you go back where I was and finish the ministry, set up some elders, get churches going and all that kind of stuff. Titus was kind of his fix-it guy. So he, did some of that. So on the page, it doesn't necessarily give us a good scope of that, but through some of his writings, that's why you have this timeline. You can see that through some of his writings, you can see how he, after some of this stuff, he writes these letters and tries to get people to help him to fulfill and continue in this ministry and stuff like that. So yeah, the gospel that has been gone out through this has got to be wonderful. And these guys were destitute. Now, I believe God's going to do this. God said, we're going to be fine. And then they were kind of going, oh, yeah, okay. No, guys, you got to slow down, man. We are going to run aground on a certain island. So it's going to happen. Sure enough, they start sensing that they're getting close. They start dredging to see how close they're getting. They see that they're getting close. And after that whole thing, he goes, guys, I told you, take a beat, get something to eat, build up your strength, because what's going to happen next, you're going to need it. You know what I mean? Type of a thing. So I think that's a huge tell. You know what I mean? Like he could have easily just said, let everything be. But when he goes, he tells them to eat, he stops and prays and gives thanks to God, always pointing things back to God. And you're right. As soon as they get through this ordeal, 276 people to tell people, dude, you're not going to believe what I just went through. And God made us survive, a lot of those things happen, when Jesus was on the earth before he ascended. Scripture says that he appeared before over 500 people just at one time. He was there for 40 days. Just one day, one afternoon, he shows up in front of over 500 people. Those 500 people or more are eyewitnesses to him being there. That many people, you got to know that somebody in that crowd must have seen this guy just a few days ago getting killed. And here he is. That kind of a testimony is just amazing. So yeah, it's kind of cool.
The experience of being in the part of the world before even cell phones, and even now after cell phones, how much people talk about stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not all gossip. It's just like where we live, it's a quarter of the city, let's say.
Mm-hmm. Uh-huh.
And I would discover, like, I was in this shop, kind of on the far end of it, not near where I live at all. And it was raining or something. I kind of ducked in. I was looking for some plumbing supplies or something.
Mm-hmm.
And the owner of the shop, in the Middle Eastern, was like, "Oh, who are you? What's your name?" And it was something, "Oh, help him out." And the worker says, "I know who he is." I said, "You know who I am?" I can know him.
Mm-hmm.
But we need each other. And I've heard about, you're the pastor. And They call me that.
Yeah.
Stuff.
Right.
So there's that word of mouth thing. And
For
I
sure.
saw it active. Because it's a society where people hang out. Hey, the white guy lives over there? Yeah, tell me about it. Or, hey,
Yeah.
the white guy lives. And, when people workers are standing around, they're chit-chat. And because I'm a white guy, or a white couple, whatever, the only one in the neighborhood, kind of stand out. We stand out. And it's something to talk about.
Yeah. Well, and that happened when on Paul's missionary journey, when he was in Ephesus. He was there for several years. And it says that the gospel that he spread went all through Asia Minor, all through what we know as Turkey today, all through there. And then after that, when he went into Judea, like he was greeted there. Like people came to him, "Hey, I know you." When he went in there before, and James came to him and said, "Hey, there's some Jewish guys that are thinking that you're saying that, Jews stink and what they do stinks and stuff, and you're talking against that. Can you be with them and go with them to temple and do some of these, the vow, the Nazarite stuff? Can you do that with them?" He's like, "Oh yeah, sure, I can go do those things to show that, I'm not dishonoring what God has put forth." You know what I mean? Because people hear, it just gets around. You know what I mean? It just gets around. And that's the amazing part is, as you started the whole conversation, is nowadays, TikTok, Facebook, whatever, you can pick up your phone and hear what some Yahoo across the world thinks about, toe fungus. But here, you don't have that. You got word of mouth, you got people riding on donkeys or walking from place to place, and the word spreads so quickly.
It's amazing how fast.
Oh yeah, how fast it is, for sure.
I've seen a reel, or TikTok, I don't know if that's a reel type thing, where it was talking about, I think, Josephus or something, and what he knew already so early, like 70 AD
Right.
was going on and what the Christians believe and that there was this Jesus
Yeah.
guy that it's very credible.
Right.
That's an account that
That's the Jewish historian that we talked about before. Yeah.
goes out and he knows.
Yeah.
Got a reasonable account of what this is all about.
Right. Yeah, it is. So it's kind of cool and kind of good. And the span of it is really amazing to me, because if something like that happens to you, when I used to manage restaurants, they would say you could have 100 people there and you could have 99 people have a great meal there. They may tell nobody or one other person, but that one person who has a bad meal, they'll tell minimum 10 to 12 people that they had a bad meal. And that, I mean, it spreads like wildfire. The only way that you can get positive feedback to go word of mouth is to do something so extraordinary that it sticks in their head and they will communicate it to somebody else. Man, you should have seen what happened. The chef came out to my table and talked to me, and he, cut my meat for me and fed me. I don't know, I mean, whatever. But when something like that happens, they're like, man, that was so great. You know what I mean? Usually you have to go so outlandishly over the top that it makes such an impression. This is over the top, making an impression. Okay. Any other thoughts, comments, questions, observations? How you doing? Good? Right on. All right, let's pray and we'll be done. Dear Lord, thank you so much for this opportunity that we had to look at this. And it's very, very important for us. I say it all the time, and I know that's what you would have us to do, is we always have to look through the lens of the first century author and through the first century audience so that they will understand and know what's going on. And then when we understand that in that context, we can then translate it to the 21st century and how that the moral to the story, so to speak, that you're trying to get us to understand through your scripture applies to us today. In this particular case, we're looking at, all these things that transpired back in those days. And even in a time where technologically they aren't as advanced as we are in things, how your word and your gospel, your salvation can spread so quickly and so fast. And you do it through just, through ordinary people, just showing them extraordinary things. Dear Lord, that still is true today. You are doing extraordinary things in our lives all the time. Help us to not take those for granted. Help us to be one of the 276 people that survived, the 276 people that saw something amazing and shared that with other people around them. Help us to be, the cheerleaders for you, knowing the wonderful blessings and love and grace that has been given to you, and share that with others. Dear Lord, as we go through this study, help us to always remember, the context of things so that we can see how this history really matters to us and how we divide our scriptures up the way that we do, understanding the things that are for us and the things that are not for us, and understanding your will and purpose in our lives today. Thank you so much for this time that we can be here together and look at this, and we take it and we lift it up to you in Jesus' name. Amen. Ooh.